And happy Wednesday to the world out there. And, gentlemen, how's it going?
Grand.
Yes.
We got a special guest with us tonight. I'm really happy to introduce
quote
RockHawk.
unquote special.
Very
Special's
special.
kind of a strong word.
Oh, Zeb knows I'm special.
All kinds of special. This is a Hawkscast podcast brought to you by the Hawkscast Forum, and with me as always is Zeb and Ross, and we got RockHawk. RockHawk, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for taking some time and blustery weather to join us.
No problem. I really appreciate you guys having me and putting up with some of my bad takes.
You know what? The internet is full of bad takes, and there's just not enough bandwidth to get them all, but we'll try and cover as much as we can tonight. The season is over. The Seahawks 2019 season has come to an end. It was a roller coaster. We all watched that game. And, you know...
Wait, spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert? You didn't watch the game?
It was a joke. Sorry. I'll stay silent.
But, no, I mean... The game that we all saw, it was the last divisional game on Sunday. We'll go around. What was everyone's take on that game? Like, after the game, how are you feeling about the season? Ross, you were watching it, and I'm sure in a very fun time zone. So what did you do after you saw that game, and how are you thinking about the season?
To be honest, despite all the bluster on the podcast and here and there, you know, late season when all the injuries all hit at the same time, like in the deep corners of my brain where I'm asked to look like objective about everything, I hate to use the word gave up, but I sort of like was resigned to the fact that this wasn't going to be it. Like, you can't have like the Josh Gordon suspension just sort of set off a wave of like, okay, we're done. Like, Josh Gordon goes out, then we get left tackles both injured. They're playing, but they're both hurt. By this game's midpoint, we're playing with our third string left guard, and he's a guy who didn't even get activated till week 7, 8, something like that. We're playing with Joey Hunt at center, and you know, he gives it his all, but borderline NFL talent. We're playing with a 33-year-old dude. We're bringing back the running backs from the last time we were in the Super Bowl. So I don't, you know, even though I was really positive on the podcast last week, to be honest, I had kind of resigned myself over. So when we lost, I've written this elsewhere, like, I'm at the most peace I've been with any offseason since we actually won the Super Bowl, because then you got nothing to look back with regret on, right? But right. Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't traumatized. I would have been ecstatic if they'd won. And when we had the ball, and I thought we were gonna pull it out, but when they didn't, I was like, you know what? We didn't have the horses to run this race at the end of the day, and that's okay. I'm okay with it this year.
Zeb,
maybe it's a new maturity.
Zeb, what about you? What was your take just after the game, and where are you right now, a couple days later?
I'll be honest, I was pretty zen about it. I was kind of mentally prepared for a disappointment, even though I went into the game with quite a bit of optimism, as I typically do, and I know that this team under Pete Carroll with Russell Wilson at the helm is capable of beating anybody on any weekend. So I definitely had hope that we'd win the game, but I was mentally prepared for the loss, and it took me all of about, I don't know, an hour and a half to kind of be ready to start looking forward to next year, or the off season, really.
Yeah. I know that everyone was giving me a hard time the last time we did the podcast, because I was pretty down, and people were questioning if this was a Seahawks podcast or a Green Bay podcast. And for a lot of the factors that everyone mentioned, RockHawk actually called us out on Twitter and said, hey, you know what, Sammy's the only one talking sense, because I was the only one to predict a loss. And it's not because I didn't believe in the team. It's just we just had so many things like going against us. We're traveling. It's a 13-3 team, even though it wasn't the most impressive 13-3 team. So many injuries, so many deficiencies, and the fact that they made it a one-score game, I was actually really impressed by. I was hoping that I was going to be wrong, and we can pull it out. But I think what it came down to is Russell Wilson, as good as he is, he really needs like a lot of his talent around him to be perfect in order for him to continue to look perfect. He can't elevate everyone to an all-star level. That was kind of my takeaway from it. So credit to Russell for having a great game, but sometimes he can't just do it all by himself. That's kind of what my takeaway was. But I am still excited for what this team is going to do in the future.
Of course. I mean, come on, look what we've seen over the years. What's not to be excited about?
RockHawk, you want to throw in your 2 cents, because you were on Twitter earlier this week. You were agreeing with me, saying that this wasn't a great matchup for Seattle.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily the matchup in regards to who we were playing. It was really going down into exactly what you were talking about, which is the team that we were putting on the field. And ultimately, like you, I had predicted a loss. However, the loss was predicated on a defense that was unable to stop their offense and an offense that was unable to stop their pass rush. Those were really the key things, and we saw quite a bit of that, though. I will say that for it to come down in the final minutes to a defensive failure on third downs twice, that was disappointing to me, in that I think everybody on here and every Green Bay fan felt like you give Russell the ball back and he's going to go down and score a touchdown. So I think that's what was really the toughest part of the whole thing. But ultimately, pleased with how well we did this year with all the cards we were dealt. One thing you mentioned, Joey Hunt, I guess that that report came out today that he was playing with a stress fracture in his leg. So, he's small enough anyway, but now you have that kind of an injury, and it seems now that really we were just playing with, 1.5 offensive linemen against that team. So, I'm happy with how they came out, and in the typical Pete Carroll fashion, they competed. They didn't back down. They didn't get blown away, and showed some resilience. So I was happy about that.
Yeah. So Seattle finds himself home for the playoffs after a road divisional game ends their run. A team that was projected to end up near 500 or even below found themselves in contention for a number 1 seed, even potentially the NFC West, but still fell short and found themselves with the top wildcard seed. Won a road playoff game in Philly, but devastating injury after injury. Seattle found unlikely backups to aid them, and their depth just kind of wasn't good enough. So this season is fresh in our mind. We're going to talk about 2019, talk about 2020. This is the Hawkscast podcast brought to you by the Hawkscast Forum. Ross, I'm going to start you off with topic number 1, and we kind of talked about it already, but I want you to go into a little bit more detail and tell me, what was your biggest reason for that loss in Green Bay? Like, if you had to put something on it, what would you throw out there?
I mean, it's injuries, and you're not allowed to say injuries because it's the NFL and everybody's hurt. But I mean, come on, like, really, that game looks different, right? People are talking about, for example, like, there's too much of the running game and why is Pete still running? But you know what? Like, remember just a few weeks ago, we had Chris Carson. He ran over 1,200 yards on a short season. Our running game, lots of the season looked good. Penny looked good. And you can't suddenly reinvent yourself in the playoffs. You can't get through. You design your team a certain way. You design your team. You even get the linemen a certain way. Like, you go out and you consciously choose to get Upati and Fluker, who at this point in their careers are much more road graders than anything else. And because of how the NFL puts a premium on passing, you can get your run blocking guards for cheaper. Great. So we have the money for other areas. And that's how you've built your team. And then you lose your top 3 running backs. You're a running team, or you build or you play off of the running, and all of a sudden you don't have that. And you don't have the left guard or his backup. You're playing with the third backup. And, like that's – I hate to say that because, again, everybody's banged up, everybody's hurt, but it's a lot to ask a team to, like, completely sort of, be a running team because that's what you've told yourself you're going to be, and then not have the personnel to run anything else, but now you don't even have your running backs. There's not a lot of room there. It's not the only reason, but that's the biggest. We just, again, didn't have the horses by the time we got to that round. And, there's a lot of the nuances in there,
Zeb,
defense.
Zeb, what about you? What would you put as like one of your biggest reasons for the defense or for the loss?
Well, look, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about why we lost this game. I think ultimately this team ended up pretty much about where they were supposed to based on how good they were this season. I think a second round loss in the playoffs, like you mentioned earlier, that a lot of people didn't even expect this team to get to 500. So I think that based on as good as this team was this season, this is about what we could have or should have expected. I think ultimately I want to blame the defense for not being able to get stops, but I honestly believe that if Malik Turner makes that catch for the first down there towards the end, we probably go on and score on that drive. I think it was just one of those drive-killing drops. And I don't think you can win or lose a game on one play, really. It's a culmination of the things that happened during that game. But I honestly believe if he catches that ball for that first down, the momentum continues, and I think we score. Then obviously it comes down to whether the defense is able to stop the Packers in the end, but we never get a chance to see how that would have played out.
Yeah, I think both of you, those are super legitimate reasons. If there was one thing that I was going to say, the biggest reason for the loss is the Seahawks coaching staff inability to decide what they want to do with Davante Adams. Time and time again, that guy I think he was like 7 for 9, and he had 7 first downs. 7 of his 9 catches went for first downs in that game. And that is just unreasonable. I wrote this on Twitter. It's like the one thing that I wish we had before this game was Richard Sherman, because he would just not only lock down one side, he could actually follow a player and lock him down. And I thought that when they had Shaquille Griffin lined up with Davante Adams, the defense did well. And I thought that he was kind of like negated. And I think that did better for Seattle's defensive opportunities, and we saw some of the flaws of the depth and the injuries to our team, because Ugo Amadi, as great as he's looked in a few snaps, he got twisted and turned around. Trey Flowers, I'm not the biggest Trey Flowers fan. I think he's okay, but I think he needed a lot of help, and Seattle just didn't put their defensive secondary in the best position possible. I don't know if that's unreasonable to ask, but that's one thing that I thought was the biggest problem, because they could not stop the Green Bay offense for what it seemed forever. Birdfinger chiming in on chat and saying trade quote unquote Flowers, and I'm not there yet. I think he's definitely serviceable, but I think he hasn't seen the growth and the progress that we've seen at maybe some other corner positions, which is not unreasonable because he's a converted safety. But that's the thing that I would give as the biggest reason for the Green Bay loss. It was the defense. They didn't have the horses. They didn't have, we just don't have the guys. But they had a chance. And maybe if we played the defensive scheme a little bit differently, we would have seen maybe a better result. Not saying it's 100%.
Do we have the skill? Do we have the skill on defense to stop a Davante Adams? Like, what would you?
Apparently not.
People say move. You want to say move Griffin around, but that's not what Griffin does.
I know, right? and that's the thing, and that's why I'm not saying it's like the definitive reason. But you guys kind of already stole the best 2-1, so I'm picking the third. Right?
I'm not slamming. I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of that out there, but it's. I feel like they needed to get sort of really imaginative. I had like, I think I wrote this somewhere, sort of a flashback to when Holmgren had that idea with
Steve Smith in the NFC Championship game.
right?
They had
and
a
they were just
linebacker. They had a linebacker cut underneath everything, and they had a corner play up top. Like
they beat him up on the line of scrimmage, and I'm like, maybe because like no other Packer receivers this year were a threat. They were not a threat. They were not. Everybody else you can cover with Trey Flowers,
right.
But there was one guy that was going to be a problem. And I wonder if maybe people talk about being a little flexible. Maybe this is the one time you did need to surprise them, come out with they wouldn't have expected. Like that's not a Pete Carroll move, but just pull a linebacker and he just slams him at the line of scrimmage, and then you pick him up after he's lost his timing off his route. Put 2 people on him, 3 people on him, and dare MVS to try to get open. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah,
nothing else was working. You may as well try to get like one creative move out of it. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think the one thing is that what we'll always see with an Aaron Rodgers is that he is a smart quarterback. For whatever you think about him as a person or him as a quarterback, he doesn't make mistakes. He's willing to throw the ball away, and he threw the ball away a ton in the end of the second and beginning of the fourth quarter when the defense was playing really well. They got 2 huge stops both times. He often would have to throw the ball away. Like he didn't have a solid answer to him. So it's not that it was impossible for the Seahawks to do it. It was just maybe unreasonable for them to sustain it for the entire second half after that one scoring drive. So it's tough because it was a close game, and maybe that's like the thing that's the hardest about it. Because it was a 1-score game, you had a reasonable, or you thought you had a chance, but just didn't have enough time, right?
Well, I mean, you talk about the Malik Turner drop, but like before that drop, I think we all sort of thought that we might have the win somehow. I think people in Green Bay did. I think everybody in the stadium in Green Bay was holding their breath, going, "Oh God, here it comes." Yeah. You were just like wondering. Like I was more of a question of like, "Don't score too fast." I was already there.
Yeah, I mean that's always been Seattle's problem. That happened in the NFC Championship game against Green Bay the last time around. That happened in the divisional round in 2012 with Atlanta. We scored too fast. We gave them a chance to win it. Yeah, it definitely is one of those things that has happened in the past.
And then it just doesn't happen.
Wouldn't you say though that's a good problem to have, in that we have a quarterback that we feel confident and other teams feel confident is able to go down and score in those situations, even if it is too early and gives the other team a chance. I would much rather have that than we have no faith our quarterback's even going to make it down in the first place.
I mean, it's brilliant. I mean, like compared to years where you thought, I mean, I can remember being not too long in the past where if it was like 3 minutes left and we got the ball back, I was worried the opposite. Like, oh, it's not enough time. Are we going to be okay? And now if you get the ball back with 3 minutes, knowing how efficient Russ is, you're like, that's way too much time. Like, just run the ball in the middle a couple times. Just do something. So, yeah, it's a great problem to have. It almost speaks more to, like, maybe some changes needed in the NFL to acknowledge the change in athleticism of kickers. Like, it's not the 70s or 80s anymore. Kickers kick from so far and so accurate now that, kicking a field goal is almost automatic, right? So that's, I mean, they already changed some of the overtime rules to acknowledge that. It used to be you had to move the ball 30 yards and then kick a field goal. So, I don't know, maybe smaller goalposts or field goals are only worth 2, or I don't know. So it's not just if you score, but you've given the other team 45 seconds, you're going to lose.
Right.
It's kind of anyway.
Well, let's final thoughts on the loss to Green Bay.
Play better defense.
Play better.
Exactly. Play better defense. Get back to being awesome on defense. No, but the only thing I want to say though is, this isn't an original thought, but we keep talking like we need a scapegoat, but you don't need a scapegoat. We lost to a 13-3 team. They were at home. Maybe, their quarterback isn't what he used to be, and maybe spends too much time making commercials, but he still is a good quarterback, and they have star players, and they have a good defense. And I don't know if we have to make some excuses. We played our best. We lost, but we lost to a 13-3 team in their stadium. So what do you take away from it? Be better next year. I'm not ashamed. I can handle it this year.
I'm with you.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on to topic number 2. Zeb, topic number 2 is what changes need to be made for this team to get over that divisional hump, particularly on the road. This is the 5th time that the Seahawks have lost on the road in the divisional round. In every game except for one, I believe it was always a one-score game. So what do you see needs to be changed for Seattle?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think the reasons that we lost in the divisional round this year are definitely different than the reasons we lost in the divisional round in the past. This is definitely a different team than what we were looking at from like 2012 to 2015, 2016. And that's another thing. Like I said before, I believe this team this year was capable of beating any team on any weekend, just as long as the right things happened for them. There was never a point in this season where I thought, you know what, we're going in this weekend, we're going to lose. I just never felt that way. So even in the playoffs, I think this exact team, which obviously we won't see this exact team again, things are going to be different next year, but I think this exact team with a stronger pass rush probably is competing to get into the Super Bowl next weekend. I think that's one of the biggest missing pieces. And they made a big deal of the 7 sacks we got last weekend against Philly, but let's face it, that's not the same thing, right? That wasn't, if anybody maybe didn't deserve to be in the playoffs this year, it was the Eagles in the shape they were in, especially after Wentz goes down. So very little pressure to the quarterback, very few turnovers in the last few games of the season. Those 2 things probably make this team considerably better.
Ross, what about you? Do you see changes that need to be made? Are any of them quick fixes? Coaching staff, personnel, offensive, defensive scheme, what do you think could make a change for Seattle, especially if they ever want to win a divisional game on the road?
They need to do some hardcore self-scouting to answer 2 questions to answer one big question, because I don't think we even know the answer. Because you can look at the people on our defense side and say, because we sit here week after week and kind of rave about it. We talk about how great of a year Griffin had. We talk about how great Diggs is once he came in. We talk about how great Cagey is. We talk about how great Clowney is. We talk about Wagner. We talk about this, that, and the other thing. But we didn't have a good defense. So is it that we're misevaluating our own players and the coaches are as well? Like, they're not as good as we think they are? Or does the scheme not fit them? Or the scheme fits, the players are good, but our coordinator is somehow not getting out of them what he should? I don't know right now. Today, I still don't know. Because, again, like, it looks like Diggs legitimately is good. I feel like Wagner's maybe lost some, but everybody around me talks like he's still great. Clowney, only 3 sacks, but we keep talking about how amazing he was and how he opens up things for other people, but I didn't see the sacks from other people either. And, oh, wow, he has the best, like, the 3rd best win rate on his going against his defender, whoever's blocking him. But if you're winning against that, but you're not getting home, well, that's something else that you have to look at. I don't know. So there's something going on in the defense. We either don't have the talent we think we do, or we're not using it right. But I will say this. At the very least, we've got a bunch of NFL capable, C plus B minus. We need at least 1 more or probably 2 more impact guys on defense. Not guys who just get, even like Bobby Wagner, man. Bobby Wagner mostly has not been like the big play guy. He's the super steady guy, never makes a mistake, takes everything down. But you need a guy who, like, the other team has to plan around. And we don't have a lot of that. We got a guy we need people who influence the game. We need a defensive rush and maybe a better safety, or maybe a new and young playmaker at linebacker or corner. I don't know. But I think it's just those things. Figure out what our problem was on defense and add a little bit more playmaking ability there.
Well, what's interesting is both of you guys are essentially talking about the defense. You guys are saying, like, hey, if we're going to make some changes, it's got to be on the defensive side. I mean, I don't know if you guys
I think it's obvious.
It's funny that you say that. But if you look at, like, the most vocal vocal proponents of saying why the Seahawks are losing or why the Seahawks are not good, even though the statistics and the record and their achievements this year totally defy that. It's almost as if it's not like the defense was an issue. And I don't know how you could come away from that game where the defense gave up 28 touchdowns or 28 points on four drives and not say that, well, you know what? A better defense, if you limit them to 20 points and your offense can score 23, you're going to win that game hands down. The Seahawks on average were giving up 24 to 25 points a game. That's really, really, really bad. And I think that's something that needs to be looked at. And we talk about we need to get players. And I agree that, you know, a corner and pass rush, that's what Birdfinger's saying on the chat as well. Those, I think, were the two biggest deficiencies. But I thought one of the things, and a couple people wrote this on Twitter, so shout out to Matty Brown, but he was talking about Justin Coleman. And the Seattle lost Justin Coleman to the Detroit Lions. They paid him 4 years, $36 million a year, which is way, way, way too much for what Seattle would want to pay for a corner. But the value of having a corner meant that Seattle went base more than any other team. And if anything else, not that the fact that the base didn't work, but it made our defense really, really obvious, right? You're not going to see KJ and whoever's playing opposite KJ like run back and forth across the field shadowing a slot receiver. They're going to put their corner up. They're going to put Bradley up on the tight end. They're going to move the obvious matchups, and there's just no disguising what they're trying to do. So,
well, I mean, it's an obvious announcement. You're probably going to be in zone.
Right, exactly. And I think that, if anything, I don't know how many times I was watching the game on Sunday saying, like, we have to stop the middle part of the field. We have to stop a pass across the middle. And
but see, I don't think that was sorry. I don't think that was scheme, though. I think that was players.
And I agree, but the idea is that we just don't have the players to fit that scheme, so we're doing something that's like the worst version. Because the general idea, and feel free to correct me, is that when you don't have the players to do what they need to do, play zone. Because zone gives you a lot more help, it covers a lot more area, and you're less likely to get burnt up top, which is a huge Pete philosophy. And I feel like because they didn't have the players, because they didn't trust their pass rush, and because they didn't have a nickel that they trusted to put on the field, they just were not going to get the best players, and therefore the scheme that they're going to put out there is going to be deficient already. Kind of like you said, it's obvious what we're doing because we're playing base defense. We're going to play a zone coverage. And what beats the zone? Finding the soft spot, waiting for someone to open up, and holding that offensive line and not give up a sack. And that's the deficiency that we saw. That's what I thought we need to be able to change, and whether that's a personnel change, a scheme change, it's probably not going to happen, but maybe a coordinator change, because, you know, whatever coordinator we have, it's just going to be Pete's philosophy. But maybe the play calling would change all of a sudden, because a more aggressive coach, a more aggressive play caller as a defensive coordinator maybe would push Pete to say, like, you know what, we got to put these players in a better position. We're going to scheme better dynamic ways to do it. We're going to be more creative with our sacks rather than just rush 6 up the middle. We're going to try and find a way. And maybe that's what we'll see. Who knows?
If they keep Clowney, then I really need a new defensive coordinator, because at the beginning of the season there was excuses for not using him right, but after you've had him all season long, like Clowney, I wrote about this way back when we got him. He's never back with the Texans. He's never that guy who's gonna like line up and just in a normal rush beat the left tackle. That's not what he does. Most of his sacks when he's with the Texans came where he did a stunt, or they've done something else to create movement along the line, so he's allowed to take advantage of his athleticism. He's got the better reactions and things like that, but he's not like a first step guy. He's not an amazing swim move or something like that. He does it all with athleticism. So you've got to create opportunity for him, because 3 sacks is stupid. It's ridiculous. He's not ever going to be a 17 sack guy, but he's got athleticism. He should be in the 8 or 9 area, but we couldn't get him, and he wasn't used right. He was still disruptive, but you should be able to get more out of him. You have to be able to get more out of him. I don't know. Do we have a second to talk about the base defense though? Because I think there's something interesting. We played it like 3 times as much as anybody else. And if the NFL's common sense was true, that you can't play base defense as your base defense anymore, like it should have been an absolute disaster. But I think it's interesting that it wasn't.
Yeah,
Right?
understand though, if I can jump in, understand that I think that one of the biggest reasons for that base defense, since we haven't seen the Seahawks do it in the past, really came down to Pete's philosophy of he wants the best players on the field.
Right.
And there were no other defensive back safety players that were better than having Kendricks out there for most of those plays. So I think that kind of forced the hand in terms of that strategy.
I totally agree. But common sense, the NFL says if you run that defense, you're just going to get burned all day long. Like literally, we ran it something like 68%, and the next closest team was like 38%.
I think that's true, but that I think speaks to Pete and how good of a coach he is, because he's going to look at that philosophy and say like, hey, what's the NFL doing? Where can I save some money if I do something that is not traditional, not what everyone else is doing, because I'm going to find players that other teams aren't willing to pony up for, and I'm going to get them on the cheap, you know?
So I wonder if with slightly better personnel, if we could even continue to make it work even.
Well, I think
make it so it's not an announcement. If you can get the right linebacker who can cover a tight end one-on-one, if you can get the right safety who can convert over, you can start disguising. It looks like you're in base and you're, for example, your strong safety's up, but he ends up taking the slot receiver. I think they can disguise things.
Yeah, his name was Ken Chancellor.
Well, he wasn't a great coverage guy, especially late in his career.
Man, he had that coverage against Gronk on that Monday night game against the Patriots. That was all the coverage I need to see. But no, I totally agree with you. Cam's special suit was definitely not coverage. He wasn't a bad strong safety, but it wasn't like his skill set. You had Earl Thomas for that. But I think to your point, Ross, that is a coaching philosophy that Pete is trying to take advantage of and to a point exploit and say like, you know what? These guys are undervalued. That means they're more desirable. I can't remember the last time we had a linebacker core as good as Bobby, KJ, and Michael Kendricks. You know?
But that brings me back to what I was saying a second ago. If they were so good, then why wasn't our good?
I think what it is it's still the deficiencies of those players, because we still didn't see enough. And it's not to say that if you find that better hybrid safety linebacker that you wouldn't be able to succeed in a base. I think it's more the fact that as good as they were, that trio, it maybe put players in positions that they're not going to be able to really succeed. We did not see Bobby the same way this year that we've seen him in the past. And I think that's because of this scheme that they're trying to run. So,
you don't think he's old?
We've talked about it. I think that he missed like 0 tackles last year, and he missed a couple this year. So he talked about all the injuries that he had in that game and in this season that he's, going to take care of in the offseason. So I think that's a factor too. But yeah, I do think that he's older and he's beat up. I mean, Luke Kuechly, the most common linebacker that is kind of comparable based upon like 1 and 1A, 1B, whatever. He just retired. Luke Kuechly of the Carolina Panthers just retired today, probably due to injury concerns and concussion concerns. So, really unfortunate that a 29-year-old star is going to retire, but good for him for taking care of his health. But I don't think Luke Kuechly was having like all pro years like Bobby Wagner was having.
No, not anymore. Can I ask a quick question? Can I go back a little bit? So you were talking about how the defense gives up 24, 26 points. Some people might say then you've got Russell Wilson. So maybe instead of trying to focus and build up that defense, which seems quite difficult in the modern NFL, by the way, should our goal be to have an offense that scores 30 points every week? Should we revamp and we be not a plotting but a go get him, quick scoring? We got the best quarterback in the NFL. Now we've got Metcalf, who seems to be a real weapon, and we got Lockett. Should the goal be then to open up the offense instead? Should we be Kansas City?
Rock, yeah, I want to hear what Rock has to say on this one.
Yeah, so this is exactly what I was railing against earlier this week. So, yes, I think in theory that may be correct. However, the two biggest things working against that coming to fruition in my mind would be number one, and everybody knows this, right? The offensive line and the pass pro. It's none of that is going to work until we have a offensive line that is capable of at least average pass protection for Russell Wilson. We know the strategy for Pete has always been run first, and so he goes for those linemen that are maulers, and the secondary would be pass protection. I think if we're going to go the route that you just mentioned, then that needs to shift, and you need to complement the pass with the run. And then secondly, I think, and shout out to my lady for bringing this up again, that doesn't necessarily negate the fact that almost every game we come out slow and we just don't score points in the first two quarters. And whether that's strategy, whatever is the reason for that, that has to be corrected, because ultimately we're going to win a lot more games if we can play 4 quarters of that rather than 2 quarters that we seem to be playing more times than not.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I think it is infuriating to think that there's just like a switch that the team puts on in the first and second halves and say, oh, we're turning it on, we've turned it off. The Seahawks are definitely trying to, and they're failing more than not. And the problem that I see it is Pete and his philosophy in regards to offense is to be safe and to stay close. But the problem that we saw in Green Bay is when the defense can't do anything, it just gives it up. Birdfinger chiming in saying the stats are maddening. And actually, shout out to Austin because he and I were talking about this on Twitter back and forth. And went back and actually counted. Seattle had 25 offensive snaps, not including any kicks that they attempted. And of those 25 offensive snaps in the first half of the Green Bay game, Russell Wilson had the ball in his hands 18 times. So that was a pass, or he got sacked, or he ran the ball himself. 7 times we ran the ball. There's only one drive where Russell Wilson did not end up with the ball at the end of that play, and that was a drive that Marshawn went for 7, 1, and 2, and then only got... they only gave him 9 yards, and they didn't get the first down. So there are times where Russell Wilson is controlling that game and the ball's going through him. Seattle only ran the ball without Russell Wilson 16 times in this one game against Green Bay. So I don't think it's just as simple as, oh, well, we just need to, play up-tempo, we need to do these things, and all of a sudden it'll fix it. I think the problem that we're seeing is the philosophy that the Seahawks are trying to implement requires, one, for Seattle's teammates to be perfect. That means no drop balls, no bad routes. He has to be perfect, and his teammates need to be perfect too, which I think is really a lot to ask, even for your quarterback. Because we saw Malik Turner drop what looked like an easy first down catch. The other thing is that it's hard to sustain that tempo, because every team that runs that high-paced offense, they also turn it over a lot. We talk about that, how defenses, especially Seattle's defense, is saying, we're going to give you 4 yards every single time, but we dare you to be perfect, and we dare you not to miss, and we dare you not to turn that ball over. And that's what was so successful about this defense this year. So that's the thing that I would be kind of pausing towards. It's not something that can't be overcome, but that would be my huge concern if we try to say, let's go up-tempo, let's give the Russ the ball 40 times a game, and see what he can do with 35 plus passes.
So the only thing I'll say on that as a counter is that I believe, based upon the numbers you just stated for that first half of, Russell and how many times the ball was run, to me, that game, again, just shines a light on how incredible Russell Wilson is, based upon the fact that several times we could see where he was scanning. He actually had some time and was scanning downfield and couldn't find anything. And this was because there was no threat of the run game. There wasn't a big play breaker in the backfield from a running back perspective. So the Packers, the Seahawks, and everybody and their dog knew that this was going to be a passing offense for this week, and so they were able to drop back and not devote 8 people up on the line of scrimmage to stop the run game that we had earlier in the year. So I think it was kind of a misnomer on that piece of it, because Russell Wilson, even in that situation, for him to make plays like he did was just exemplary.
Yeah.
Let me just add real quick. And I know numbers don't tell the whole story ever, but just as a reference here, 5 games this year where Russell threw more than 35 passes, we went 1-4 in those games. So
yeah, and
here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. There's a lot of games show up in the first. So what's the answer to that then? We just ignore that? Is there a reason, or is it a fluke? Is it a weird just coincidence? And if not, I mean, does that point to something? Maybe not airing it all out, but is there something they should change early on?
I think what it is, and this is maybe an oversimplification of it, is that Russell, when he sees like he's got 4 seconds behind the offensive line and he can't find someone because they're playing 7 and 8 man coverage on a 3 or 4 person route tree, what happens is Russ takes like the yards underneath and he scrambles, and then that forces the defense to kind of step up. And that's what we saw a lot of in the second half. Russell ran it 5 times really effectively, and those 5 times are enough to get the Green Bay defense, to kind of crowd back up, and then it opens up the middle of the field. So I think it's one of those things that Russ, because he understands Pete's philosophy, is that he's not going to run it until it's necessary, which is why we haven't seen him run it a lot.
See, that's where I don't think it's his Pete's philosophy. I think it's...
Are you saying that's Russ? You saying that's Russ not wanting to run it?
No, not at all. What I'm saying is it's where Pete goes away from his own philosophy and makes a concession to modern economics.
I think that's
Pete,
that's
early
hard
in
to
his
know for
career,
sure.
Russ ran in the first quarter, in the second quarter, and he used to do that a lot. And again, I've referenced this before. We used to, we that great Rocky Cito giving the talk where talking about how Russell's ability to run improved Marshawn Lynch's running.
Yes, I agree.
And Marshawn Lynch's ability to run improved Russ's, because you didn't know. You had to, but that's not what happens anymore. Even when they do run like an RPO, the defense doesn't pay attention to Russ anymore until the second half. So it hurts the running game. It hurts Russ's ability, and it makes the game 10-11. When your quarterback's not an option, most teams play like that way, but you don't have to. You don't have to play 10 against 11 football, and it's hard with the increasing speed of defenders to win that way, which is one more reason why, for example, the Ravens had so much success this year until they ran into Derrick Henry.
Until they couldn't, until they weren't playing ahead. That was my biggest thing that I was worried about the Ravens. Like, are they a team that's going to be able to come from behind? And
I don't want to necessarily emulate them, but even in the game when we lost them, I came away from thinking, you know what? I know it's a little bit risky, but I think you trust in Russell Wilson's smarts and his awareness, and you got to start reusing him, all of his ability. You're going to pay him that much? I don't say make him throw. Oh, we're paying him $35 million, make him throw 40 times. No. But use all of his ability.
Yeah.
Bring everything. He earned that $35 million contract because he could run, because of all of his ability. But then once you pay it to him, you're afraid to use part of it. I get that. That's a lot of money to be invested in, and if he gets hurt, there goes the season. But you know what? He's never missed a down up to now. And you just got to roll. You can't be afraid to be hurt. You can't be afraid to lose.
I think that's totally reasonable, and again, you're putting the caveat of, but obviously there's a higher risk of injury.
There is, but
Austin shared this on the forum, and it was a comment from Nick Wright. He does a First Take show on Fox Sports 1, but he was saying, like, he asked a question theoretically: what's the point of buying this and spending and investing in this premium sports car that is Russell Wilson, but then being too fearful to let him really drive, like just keeping him in the first 4 gears as opposed to going all the way to 7 or 8. Chris Canty was there.
I just think it means something different from what Austin thinks it means. I don't get, because what Austin thinks it means is throw 40 times, and like I'm just saying that's not even how he earned his money. He earned his money by making it an 11 on 11 game. So make it an 11 on 11 game, not 10 on 11.
And I think that's fair, and I think that's something that I think if they open that up, and I think that if Russell Wilson was really smart about doing it, like instead of like waiting until the third and fourth quarter to really tuck it and run, like if he does it in the first quarter, put that in the back of their head, even if it's like a 1 or 2 yard game and you're sliding and you're avoiding the big hit, maybe that's all that it would take.
Yeah, I mean, because the thing is, even though he's in his 30s now, he's not slower. You don't lose speed. You lose your reaction time, but there's a lot of people in their 30s and 40s who are just as fast. You can straight line speed to straight line speed.
Yeah.
He's still got awareness. He's still got pocket awareness.
Oh yeah, he's definitely the smartest running quarterback, definitely in the league.
I have to step away for 1 second.
All right, well let's move on ahead, and we are going to talk about topic number 3. And topic number 3 is more of a philosophical question. So Zeb, I'm going to ask you this first. We don't know how long Pete's going to be our head coach, but what would you like to see in the next Seahawks coach?
Somebody as good as Pete Carroll.
All right. Great. Topic done. Let's move on.
I don't know. Like, does Pete Carroll have his deficiencies? Sure. I mean, we've talked about it before. Clock management, maybe a little bit of a stubbornness to get away from the way he does things. If maybe there's a better option out there for some things. Yeah, I don't know. I'd like if and when, or obviously when we move on from Pete Carroll, I hope they can find somebody who's able to match his success. And I don't think that's probably not very likely, in my opinion. That for me is reason enough to want him to stick around for as long as possible.
Russ, have you thought a lot about what a successor to Pete or what a new Seahawks coach would look like?
I have, because I've tricked myself before when I thought I didn't know he would coach us. A couple times I thought he was kind of grooming somebody, but I want somebody who, like Pete Carroll, doesn't just have a coaching technique but has a philosophy, if that makes sense. He has and it actually creates some of his weak points because it all goes together. It's holistic. He doesn't see the offense as the offense and the defense as the defense, and especially he has an approach to the game. He has an approach to life that he borrows and he applies it to the game, and he applies that to everything from play calling to roster construction to everything else. He's got a coherent, holistic approach, and I think that makes it easier to plan because the modern NFL is so much more complicated, and all the moving parts all connect everything else in ways that, for example, the pseudo analytics people don't get. They don't take into consideration how much exactly every single thing you do affects every single thing else you do. Whereas Pete Carroll, who actually had the first analytics department of any NFL team, and people don't realize that and think he doesn't and thinks he's all on instinct, he has his own sense of what he thinks is important. And I think that's what you want in the next coach as well. Somebody who's got a sound view and a holistic approach. God, that sounds so new age, and I'm not a new ager at all.
Ross, bring out some crystals, getting them in the light.
I want him with crystals and
incense
and sage, and he's burning the sage. He should be out in the wiki app doing the sun dance. No, I just want somebody who's got I want something who's got more than just like a tech. I don't want like a technical approach to football. I want a philosophical approach to football.
And I get what you're saying, because what you're basically saying is if you look at Seahawks as an organization, everything runs as one organization. What you see a lot of teams do is, oh, we're going to hire an offensive-minded coach, and they're going to be entirely charge of the offense, and they're going to hire a really strong defensive coordinator who's basically entirely in charge of the defense. They're almost two branches of one sports team. Whereas Seattle says, like, no, this is our entire philosophy. We are going to get the defense and the offense, treating each other like friends. We're going to do competitions. We're going to get people feeling that love for each other, and there's that sense of like this unified body, and that's kind of what Pete's going for. I really think that it's going to be hard to find that because you rarely see that in the NFL. You look at all of the new coaches that have been hired, not even including the retreads. None of the people that are being hired are going to apply that kind of philosophy. The new head coach that was the Vikings offensive coordinator, he is offensive coach. He kind of runs everything on the offensive side. He's already taken some of the offensive coaches from the Vikings, all the position coaches. But Mike Zimmer is a defensive-minded coach. You look at Ron Rivera. Ron Rivera is kind of in that same boat. He's a defensive-minded coach. He's going to hire an offensive coordinator that he's comfortable with. It's going to continue to be that modular the head coach controls one side, and then whatever coordinator is their opposite, they're going to control that other side. I think it's going to be really hard to get away from that because I don't think you could find that coach.
Well, I think what it points to is it's very likely to be an internal hire. And coaches that work with Pete Carroll often come away with a more holistic approach. They learn from him, and then they learn what he, for example, considers important. You can bring in new people. It's just that they're going to have to adapt instead of just bringing in their system. They have to. Schottenheimer came in, and he didn't just run his system. He ran it in, sort of translated through, filtered through the Pete Carroll philosophy, right? Yeah. So you could do that. It might even, to be honest, it might shock people. It might be Schottenheimer. And who brings in a disciple of on the defensive side, who can interpret it, who can keep that philosophy alive on the side. It would shock people because it's not what people want. It's not what people need. But to be honest, like if he was to retire next year, who else? It wouldn't be Ken Norton. Sorry.
No. So, I mean, I think if you're going to go for a defensive-minded guy, you're going to bring back Gus Bradley because he's not a head coach right now. I think that would be.
But he didn't have success as a head coach. He sort of like Peter principled out.
Dude, he had to coach the Jags. Come on now, throw him a bone.
RockHawk, what are you thinking? Like next coach?
Yeah, just like Zeb, I don't even want to think about it. I want it like this, but. Ultimately, I think one of the most understated and underrated parts of what Pete Carroll does is that ultimately you guys talk about, sort of philosophy and things like that. From my standpoint, being sort of what I do in my own line of work, in my own career, one of the biggest things that I need to do as a leader is create a culture. And that culture needs to be where the people that work for me and with me are given the opportunity to be, to be as great as they basically want to be and can be. And that they're rewarded for those things. And they like going to work. They like the people that they work with. Each one of those things, I think, translate into what we would commonly refer to as, this is a good locker room, as opposed to, this is a Cowboys locker room where there's always dissent, especially with the owner and players. And so that's one of the biggest things I think that I don't know if that can just be easily replicated, because the general person, whether it be a coach or a manager or a CEO, it's typical for them to say, I have these 8 positions to create widgets. And I want to go out and find the 8 smartest, best people that create widgets. And that's going to work into being we're the best around. And without any thought into the culture, how they, interact with each other, how they collaborate. To me, that's where really Pete Carroll and John Schneider really shine.
Definitely. All right. Well, let's wrap up. We got one more topic, and we'll just kind of fire through this one a little bit quicker. But topic number 4, Ross, I'm going to hit you up first. What's next for the 2020 Seahawks? What's the one thing that you expect to see happen in this offseason going into the next year?
We're going to expect the unexpected in the draft. It's going to happen. It's not going to be conventional. It's not what we think they should do. We're going to be outraged, and it's going to work, and that'll be Super Bowl. I think they've got the cap space and the draft capital to do what they want. We're all going to have our little opinions of what it is, but John Schneider kind of sees things on another level than us. And they're going to do a couple things that we, like I said, we're going to be outraged. And then when we're like 11-2 and like I'm going to be buying my playoff tickets for next year again and be going, cool. And then we're going to next year, we're not going to fail down the stretch. And I think next year we take a big step. They've got a solid foundation. We went further in the playoffs this year than last. And now I do think they can get over the hump. Nice. It might entail home field advantage, but I think they can do that.
Birdfinger chiming in real quick saying a rebuilt defensive line. That's what he's looking forward to in 2020. Zeb, what about you? What are you looking for in 2020 for the Seahawks?
I would not be mad if they went like 60-40 in the draft, D-line and O-line, and that's it.
No skill possessions, just a bunch of dudes, a bunch of fatties in the trenches.
Yeah, just some big, strong, and then some, I want to see them go edge, obviously, and get some guys that can rush the passer. I think that assuming that Carson and Penny can come back from their injuries, I think we're in pretty good shape at that position. I think we're, obviously you could always get guys that can help, but I think with Lockett and DK, we're in pretty good shape at wide receiver. I think pass rush and pass protection are the two most important things that we've been lacking lately, and I think that we have quite a few mid-round draft picks, mid and high-round draft picks that I think should be spent towards fixing those things.
RockHawk, do you have anything that you want to see in 2020? Give you a chance to chime in.
Yeah, the only two things to kind of go off of exactly what was just said is that I think next year is predicated on John Schneider's ability with the coaching staff to have another at least good, but would love another slam dunk type of a draft where, some of these position players that we're talking about, we then have some depth. We have some starting caliber players that we just didn't this year. And if we have another one of those really terrible drafts as we did a few years ago, where, you guys know exactly the ones I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I think we're really going to be in the same boat. And, I would expect the same thing. So to me, it's all about that draft and trusting that hopefully they hit some home runs with it, because if so, then I would agree that they're competing for a Super Bowl next year.
Yeah, it's amazing to think about how close they really could be. The two things that I'm looking forward to for 2020 is get healthy. They have so many injuries that they're so far removed from guys playing that if we see them healthy, we're talking about a whole different team, which I think would be amazing, and hopefully sustain health. The other thing is we really need our rookies to step up. I think we saw a lot of growth in guys like Shaquille Griffin, but guys like Shaquem, they really need to be able to kind of lock down what that role is. I thought he had an amazing play. I really wish that was going to be one of the highlights of a win, but wasn't meant to be. We need to see some growth in guys like Trey Flowers. he can be average against average receivers, but he's got to do better against, some of those premium guys like we saw with Devontae.
If, in my opinion, Sammy, if Trey Flowers and Lano Hill are on the field starters next year, that means we failed.
I would agree with that. Definitely with Lano Hill. And what I would want to see is I want to see someone challenge Trey Flowers for sure.
Just to I don't want to like die on a hill of defending Trey Flowers, but I will say we were all pretty disappointed in Griffin's sophomore year as well, right? But this year he, by most people's evaluation, had a great year. So this is Trey Flowers' second year. So maybe next year he makes the step just like Griffin made this year. I don't buy that Griffin had a great as year as everybody else thinks. I think you can have a lot of pass breakups, but that just gives the offense the ball back. You got to have some interceptions if you touch the ball.
I think that's fair, especially if he's your number one.
You got to have some. I mean, because it's not the 80s. You're not going to have 11 interceptions like everyone Walls, but if you have the most pass breakups, you're touching the ball that often. You got to be able to find a way to come away with a few of them, 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Because again, if it's second down and you just break it up, sorry.
How many interceptions did Sherm have this year?
I think 4 or 5.
Very few.
Right, but that's also a little bit different though. People don't target him. People don't avoid Griffin.
Unless you're Kirk Cousins. I mean, real quick, I don't know what Kirk Cousins was doing, but he was basically throwing to Richard Sherman running a comeback route on that play. So,
But again, with Griffin having pass breakups, that means he is getting targeted. And again, if you're touching the ball that often, you got to find a way to come away with it.
I agree. I think it's a fair ask to say. Real quick, Birdfinger chiming on the chat saying, a healthy Dissy to show those 49ers schmucks how it's done. I agree. And I'll say he wants Trey Flowers to be replaced. He's depth, not a starter. So we'll see what happens. But those are our topics. Let's get into some predictions.
Sherman had 3 interceptions this year.
3.
In 15 games.
All right, so let's get some predictions in. RockHawk, I'm actually going to invite you for all of these as well, so feel free to go first on any of these. And I want to know, who is your AFC champion Titans at the Chiefs this weekend?
It's going to be Chiefs by 21.
Ooh. Ross, what about you? What's your prediction for this game?
I'm riding Derrick Henry to the end.
Ooh, that would be... At this point, the Titans have won 2 road games against the number 1 and number 3 team.
Yeah.
That would be something if they beat the Chiefs. Zeb, who do you think is going to win the AFC game?
I think the Titans are going to put up quite a fight, but I think the Chiefs are going to end up winning it.
This is one of those head versus heart. My head says that it's got to be the Chiefs. They came back from 24-0 against a Houston team and just ran away with it. They scored 50 points. I don't see how the Titans have a chance to really contain them unless Derrick Henry runs the ball 100 times. RockHawk, who you have winning this NFC Championship game? Do you have the Niners or the Packers winning?
I have, my heart wants to say the Packers, and so I'm actually going to go Packers. And surprisingly, I'm actually going to say that it's going to be by more than 8 points.
Okay. Ross, what about you? Who do you have winning NFC?
I'm disagreeing again because I think I don't want the 49ers, but I think it's going to be the Packers.
Zeb, who do you got?
I'm going with the Green Bay Packers because I think Packers-Chiefs is the best matchup left possible, and it's a rematch of a game we all remember very fondly, Super Bowl I.
Birdfinger's got the Chiefs winning. Tony wants both teams to lose, and Birdfinger also says he's got the 49ers winning. Sad trombone. I'm thinking the Niners are going to win. They look like a more complete team. Their deficiencies are a lot less. I think they're obviously much, quote-unquote, worse at the quarterback position, but I think overall they just have a really strong, balanced team. That's what you get when you draft 5 top-round defensive linemen in the first 5 picks. You get really, really great defensive players. So, that's all it takes, guys. We have to tank for 5 years, and we'll get that defensive line we always want.
Yeah.
Rock.
49ers took 1 year. They got Bosa and then the Super Bowl.
I know. Rock, is Clowney going to return next year? Yes or no?
Yes, I think Clowney will return.
Zeb or Ross? Either of you guys.
Zeb, go ahead.
Yeah, he's coming back. I need him.
I don't think so. I just think somebody's going to pay too much.
Yeah, the cost is going to be the determining factor, but ultimately, I believe him when he talked about that. He loved it here, and he was actually trying to tell other players that may be released or free agents that you need to come up here. You know, you'll never play at a better place. So, to
That
me,
dude wants to be paid, and they're going to be like, "Dude, you got 3 sacks."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm thinking it's going to be
He
really
wants to
hard.
be paid like games.
It's going to be really hard for Clowney to come back, not just because of the contract, but because I think the way that the NFL looks at freak athletes like that, and if he's healthy, I think he's going to get a big contract. I think Seattle will offer him a fair one, but I think he's more likely to take the money because it'll be his first contract. Is Jaron Reed going to return, Rock?
Yeah, me?
Oh,
Rock? Who did you?
I call the Rock, but Jaron Reed. Ross, I know you want to answer this too, so you can go first on this one.
I don't know if I want to answer. It's hard. It's the most perplexing person on the team when I look at that question. Actually, I don't know. I don't know what to do with him.
All right.
I'm afraid if he goes somewhere else, he gets the 10. He returns to form and gets 10 sacks. But I'm afraid to pay him for what he did last year. When this year he was suspended and then never really got into shape. And I don't know, man. I don't know. Yeah, he's coming back, but because that's no. Actually, you know what? No, he's not. Because somebody's going to be dumb.
All right. Zeb.
Somebody's going to look at 10 sacks and pay.
Jaron Reed coming back.
Nope.
Rock. Jaron Reed coming back.
no.
Bird fingers, no. I'm going to say no, too. I think this is one of the things that's really tough about this particular free agent year. You've got guys that maybe you want more, but other teams are going to pay more. They'll fit better with Seattle, but some team's going to overpay them. Is Justin Britt going to be a cap casualty? We don't have a center behind him. Quote, unquote, maybe it's Ethan Posick. Zeb, is Justin Britt coming back next year? Is he going to get cut?
How many years does he have left on his
He
contract?
got 1 year left.
He's gone.
Gone. Rock.
Gonzo.
Is he coming back?
Yeah, I believe he is coming back.
Ross.
I think he's coming back, but at a reduced salary. I mean, his injury is going to make it all the leverage.
I think that would be really interesting to see if they offer him a pay cut and if he would take it. Birdfinger is saying he's cut. I am of the mindset that you cannot lose 60% of your offensive line in one offseason. So I think that puts the Seahawks in a bun, and I think they're going to retain him. They're going to try and offer him a salary reduction, but he might pull a Brandon Meebane and say, no, man, what are you going to do, cut me? And they're like, you're right, we're not going to cut you. So that's what I'm going to say. Yes or no, is Russell Wilson going to shine in the Pro Bowl, Ross?
Yeah. He's going to light it up.
Light it up. Pete
5 touchdowns.
Pete and the coaching staff, they're coaching the Pro Bowl this year. Zeb, what do you think about Russ in the Pro Bowl?
400 yards, 5 touchdowns. He plays the whole game.
Rock, what you got?
Yeah, it seems like Russell seems to do special things in the Pro Bowl, especially because he gets some nice pass protection because they're not actually trying to rush the guy. So, yes, he will.
Yeah, for whatever reason, Russ appears to dominate the Pro Bowl where he's just throwing it up and everyone's catching everything. So it's just like go routes. But yeah. The final prediction for the evening. Are we going to see the Seahawks trade their first round pick before the first round or during the first round? Zeb, what do you think?
I'll say during.
Ross, what you got?
During.
Rock, you got ideas of when that first round is going to get moved?
Yeah, it will be during, and it will be.
You know, I'm going to throw a flyer out there, and I'm going to think that they're going to find a mystery trade before the draft. They're going to acquire some depth, they're going to acquire some talent, and they are going to trade that first round pick before the draft starts.
I'm going to say they trade up,
Ooh.
not down.
Ooh.
You know, Ross, we've been talking and hoping about trading up for years and years and years. If this is
It's not like they never do it. They have.
They've traded up. The last time they traded up in the first round, though,
I don't know in the first round, but it's not like it's against their religion or something. They
That
will do it
seems
if
like it is.
it seems like
I mean,
it is.
Like they
First round
do, I mean,
pick should
second
be
and
against
third
their
round
religion.
Yeah,
I
there's
mean,
like
they're
a
not
little.
great.
There's a little statue of Paul Tagliabue in the corner, and Pete and John are like praying to it. Do we make this move? Do we make this move?
Yeah,
Right.
based upon the selections we've made in the first round, then they maybe should trade out of it every time.
Yeah, yeah.
I just think like this year they're going to look at it and go, look, we got that far last year. We've got a whole bunch of picks, but we don't need a bunch of depth right now. What we need is impact. And I think they realize that. And I think they're going to go up this time.
I think that would be. I would be in for that ride because I'd like to see what they could do with a really high pick because they have had success when they're drafting in the higher tens. You know, like every
Earl Thomas, where did he go?
Earl Thomas went 15.
Yeah, I think they can get up that.
Okung was 6.
Sorry?
Okung was 6, I believe, in that draft.
6 and 15 in that draft.
Yep.
Okay. So, right, I can see them going up to 15. I want them to get all the way to 2, but I can't do the math. I can't find a way.
You're basically trading like multiple first rounders to move up that high.
But to get to like 15, you're just talking like 400 points of stuff. So they get rid of one of their second rounders and maybe their late second and like a fourth.
Yeah,
You're
we
pretty
still have a
close.
second rounder, which is amazing to think about.
I think we have 2 second rounders, right?
We do have 2 second rounders. We don't have a third because that's all that Clowney took.
Right. You give up one of the second, and I don't want to give it. Give up the first and maybe one of the seconds, and like the fourth, and then go up to 15 and grab somebody awesome at 15.
It could be done.
At 15, you're looking at somebody. I mean, if you want to go, you could go maybe like what's his name, AJ Epinesa.
I have no clue who's in the draft. Ross is going to help us all off season long. But this is a great time. Gentlemen, do you have any shout outs for the evening?
Shout out to Yumi for all her help lately, and always, but especially lately. Shout out to Tony getting me signed up into the X-Wing League, and shout out to you guys for an awesome season, and RockHawk for joining us.
Agreed.
Yeah, dude. Shout out to RockHawk for coming on with us.
Rock, you got any shout outs for us?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Shout out to my lady, Mama Logger, Tanisha. Other than that, happy to be here. I definitely will not be here discussing what draft picks we'll get because I don't know anything about college players. So,
yeah. I want to shout out to Tony and to Birdfinger for listening in live. Shout out to Rock for joining us today. It was awesome to have you. Shout out as always to Ross and for Zev for being here almost every week. We are the Hawkscast Podcast. You can find us on Hawkscast Forum. You can find us on Twitter at Seahawks Podcast and Seahawks Forum. You can find all 3 of us on Twitter, and we're all over the place. So follow us, check us out. This was a really fun year. There's a lot to be excited for next year, and go Hawks.
Go Hawks!
go Hawks.